right, thank you for attending this. I believe it's the last session before lunch. Jaap van Oss recently joined Citi's Cyber Intelligence Centre. Actually, before I get into that, pardon me, I'm going to remind you, we've got TLP White, or under the new system, TLP Clear, so you can post this on social media. There's going to be time for questions and answers at the end. Questions can be asked at the microphones at the front or in the centre. Please don't forget to do the surveys when you're done with this. Silence your devices. And finally, as I said, Jaap van Oss recently joined Citi's Cyber Intelligence Centre, the cyber intelligence lead for EMEA. You can read his profile on his long work in cybercrime, or actually against cybercrime. Yep, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So hello everybody. How are you liking the conference so far? Is it good? For me, I think it's excellent to be here and it's an honor. It's my first time speaking, first time first. And what I noted this last couple of days are a couple of buzzwords. I don't know if you recognize them, but there was a lot of talk about ecosystems, cybercrime ecosystems, ransomware ecosystems, all kinds of ecosystems. And there was another one, a ransomware, obvious one, I suppose. I hope you all recognize that. And there's one even a little bit more obvious. It was sharing. We need to share. We need to rally and share. We need to collaborate. And sharing is not new in this community. I know that for sure. But I just want to speak a little bit about how we do and see information sharing and why it's important to us. And yes, I'm Jaap van Oss. I'm Dutch. And you can see that. So I crashed with my bicycle last Saturday. You can still see the bruises there. So yeah, really Dutch. There was no alcohol involved. There was also no helmet, which is a pity. Nevertheless, I come from quite a long law enforcement career, spent it always in cyber, and now I jumped to what we call the dark side, or what my former colleagues would call the dark side, and I started to work for Citi's Cyber Intelligence Centre. Completely different, but I still look at the same modus operandi, the same groups, the same things. My job is to collect intelligence, but also to share out intelligence, and to finally, and hopefully this will also result from this talk, to engage. That's my job. So, okay. Sharing threat intelligence and information analysis and insight is basically the thing we use to collaborate with our peers who face basically the same threats. And sharing intelligence is also a key aspect of a dynamic intelligence and data-driven cybersecurity strategy or posture. And we do this intelligence sharing with peer financial institutions, but also with other involved stakeholders. And why we do that is to prevent, to detect, and to respond to cyber incidents and threats. And that way we try to strengthen our joint defenses, and we strengthen the broader financial or the cyber ecosystems in our case. However, that said, many organizations firmly support intelligence sharing, and individuals like you too. And we aspire to become good citizens and actively share with others. And there are often internal and organizational barriers, hurdles to take that limit our information sharing. And very few organizations achieve an effective and efficient level and consistency of sharing and collaboration that way. And that, we argued, is limiting the amount of valuable insight being shared directly between peers and via existing sharing groups and communities. And in turn, this is slowing the development of cross-sector, multi-agency, multidisciplinary collaboration. And that, I think, was one of the key items also, that public-private cooperation, multidisciplinary cooperation, and facilitate that by information sharing. And in Citi, we have a partnership and engagement team where I'm part of. And we actually made an effort to examine and address these internal barriers and to create a program, to create policies, to create processes to facilitate efficient, safe, and scalable and actionable intelligence. And also that all with legal and regulatory and supervisory overview. And that means that we do not have to go too legal before we share out something, and they would probably say no. Now we can make our own decision within this framework to share out. So that's basically where we were at. Okay, the title, Who Shares Wins? Who Shares Wins is a derivation of Who Dares Wins. And Who Dares Wins is the motto that Sir David Stirling gave to the SAS, the Special Air Services, you know. And that's a group of men, a small group of men that fight the many. And we found that motto so interesting, positive, active, enthusiasm, that we said, okay, let's call that program Who Shares Wins, with the same positive and interesting and memorable connotation as the Who Dares Wins. And of course that name is succinct, it's memorable, you know, you associate with it, and it's also positive and dynamic, and it shows success. And that's what we want to achieve with this information sharing. We want to have success. We want to action the intelligence that we share. And it is also somehow challenging us to make it work. So that's how we got around to that. Little bit of the background. In Citi, we are strong advocates of collaboration and information sharing. Maybe not as much as we should do, but we are on the right direction. And I think also our senior leadership are strong advocates of collaboration. But nevertheless, it isn't always easy to bring that into practice. And we all know that sharing helps to prevent, detect, response to cyber threats, cyber events, and things like that. So we should do it, because it helps us to strengthen our defenses. And if you have, you know, a dynamic cyber and information security strategy and system and program, sharing should be part of that. Because in the end, it will lead to a more resilient, in our case, financial ecosystem, but it probably will help the whole cyber ecosystem too. That is the background where we started working from. So the challenge is, we had a pretty good resource partnership and engagement team, and we actually already shared out successfully with our peers and partners intelligence and collected that. even before we had this program, because a lot of the information that we share is informally shared. And you know, when things get rough and there are incidents, you start communicating with your peers, and hopefully also in between the CISO teams and in between the banks and with law enforcement. And you will do that. But a lot of it is informal. And that means that it's not always actionable in that case. So there's a big challenge. Nevertheless, we knew it was successful. And it was making a positive contribution also to the posture of our organization, of our bank. Nevertheless, there were still these limiting factors and barriers. And we were actually lacking an approved and documented internal policy or process. There was no agreement in place with our lawyers and no fully auditable way of the information that we shared. And that was what we found a challenge, to make that system somehow, to formalize it in a way, so that we could use it, that it was agreed, that we could also track what we were sharing. And just also to give you an example. In somewhere, I think, April or so, maybe even earlier, last year we started to track Cobalt Strike beacons or endpoints. And we did that quite good, and I think also some other peers will do that. And every time we would, of course we would at first start tracking them, because we wanted to see if we had own beacons or instances in our networks, in our systems. And then we started working on the communication of those Cobalt Strike beacons to find out where the C2s were hosted and located. And we did that regularly, and then we started to build, you know, lists with new Cobalt Strike instances and new C2s. And we started sharing that with the community. It's a simple example. Nevertheless, it was worthwhile to do that. It gave better insight in how this infrastructure was used and how peers and other collaborators were being targeted by this. Similar, we did something with the Beefeater command and control. Beefeater is, you know, originates from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, so it's a completely different group. But also there we started, and that group is of particular importance to us because it's hitting financial infrastructure. Not as directly, but financial infrastructure. So if you're a cyber intelligence person there, you take note of those kind of developments. And we started building a picture of these C2s that were being used. Again, also mapping out bits and pieces of infrastructure. And then another example, a little bit different, but you know when Revol used that 0-day to compromise the Kaseya VSA instances, we started tracking those Kaseya instances who were open to the internet and could probably be compromised. Meaning, and started to share out that information with others. These are all examples, and you know, of work that is to do. So, why I'm saying this is that if we really want to disrupt cybercriminal or other infrastructure, we should share what we see on our networks, and that way, in a common effort, try to map out the infrastructure and to see where we can interrupt, where we can intervene. Okay, the program itself, because I also want to tell you what we actually did, how this program looked like. And at first we were starting to see, okay, we were just, getting all the white papers and all the framework on information sharing together and started to think of how that framework would fit in our organization. Then we started identifying the data sets that might be of interest, or the pieces of internal intelligence that might be of interest to you too. So we identified that. And then we started to identify potential partners to share with. Of course, first peer financial institutes, but soon after also organizations like the NCSC here in Ireland or in the UK or in the Netherlands, CERT community, always important, also law enforcement. So it's not only about the financial sector, we want to work with whomever is involved. And then we basically, so we had the content, we had what we wanted to share, and then we just were looking, we had the audience, and then we were just, we should have controls. And so we started looking at which controls we had. So we designed what we call a maker-checker program. So we derive intelligence internally, and the maker will look at the intelligence, will assess if it's useful, and then it will basically put it into our process, and it will be as a potential share to whomever. And then there's the second person, colleague, who is the viewer, and he will review that sharing out, that share that's already there. So you've got the 4 eyes principle. So whatever goes out is good. It's useful, but it's also something that wouldn't cause too many troubles internally. And then you think, but if you want to share intelligence, you have to be quick, and a maker-checker process, that takes time. Of course, it takes time, but not that long. And we even have a quick share process that we can, with those kinds of information that are valuable and quick to share, we can do that within half an hour. And if that doesn't work, we can always fall back to the old information sharing principle, and that's our informal networks we use. So what we then have is this, this process, this framework, and who shares wins. It's also positive. It also, we felt good that we had it, and we use it a lot. It is a bit clunky, but it's a concept that works. I will come back to that later. Another example, I have to take care of the time. Conti, everybody knows about Conti, the Conti leaks. Everybody knows probably that there is the 10 million reward for identify key players by the State Department there. And you can earn another 5 million if you identify a conspirator somewhere else in the world. We also know that they attacked Costa Rica. And before that, to give it also a bit couleur locale, 14 May 2021, the Irish health services here were attacked by Conti. And that was, of course, an awful attack, and 80% of their infrastructure was contaminated. And it meant that a lot of those health services weren't working at that point in time, and which is, of course, a very dreadful attack. And now, why do I tell you all this? Because this is all OSINT. This is all things we can find anywhere else. And it probably gives a good point for the Cybercrime Atlas, their OSINT, a vision of OSINT analysis. Nevertheless, I tell you this because this group, oh, I was sorry, man, I screwed up a little bit. what we see last year, what we see in April was social engineering campaigns towards our staff across multi-agencies. And it was a bizarre call campaigns. And after a bit of work, we could link them to Wizard Spider. Wizard Spider is Conti. And then that is why Conti was of interest to us, because it was targeting our periphery. So the combination of OSINT and what we found on in our logs on our perimeter gave us insight. And I think, and if that insight would help others, then we will share it out. That's why these groups, that's why this is an important example. And then subsequently, we see after these bizarre call campaigns with changing TTPs and IOCs all the time, we see the Blackbuster ransomware targeting our periphery. And based on the design of the leak site, but also the way they support their victims and the timing of their data leaks, Blackbuster could be, linked to Conti also. So this is an interesting group, or this is an interesting topic. So what we see, we will share out to the larger community to make sure that we have the best information position possible to go after these guys. That's the goal. So what does it all result to? Well, basically, we have a process with the appropriate controls for sharing information and intelligence. And as said, not only with our peers in the financial industry, but with CERTs, with the CERT community, but with law enforcement, but with everybody who might be at stake here. And that is, I think, very powerful. We see an increase in our quality of the information that we share out, and also the quantity, actually. And we are able to track it and trace it. We know exactly what we have shared with whom. We also know what feedback we got, if we got feedback. We have a better understanding internally about our cyber threat intel function and how it interacts with other information owners in the bank. And it makes a significant contribution to Citi cybersecurity posture, having this program in place. And most of all, we feel like we are doing the right thing, like we are good citizens. We not only talk about sharing, but we also share. And then to finalize, what we also have is, and I think more of you will have that, but we have our top 10 threat actors. And it's an exercise we do regularly to see which groups, might be nation-state groups, might be criminal groups, are targeting our bank. And that way we somehow, can set our priorities as you wish. And what we see there lately is that these actors are very advanced and they use and cloud competent. And some of them are even targeting cloud services only. We see the supply chain being targeted more and more. And we also see that they abuse the continuous integration and development system. So those are trends that we see. And how do we measure them? We look at capability and intent, and then we do this exercise every so often to make this top 10 threat actors. And of course, you can say that in the top, there might be APTs with a China origin or with any other nation-state origin. But there are also criminal actors there, like Wizard Spidey, spider, like Conti, somewhere in the middle at this point in time. And you can name the other ones too. And why am I using this? This is because I think I come to the challenge right now. With the Who Shares Wins concept, we have a powerful instrument to share out information, but also to attain collaboration. And, you know, we can use it as Citi, but you might use it if you wish. And the concept doesn't perhaps fit perfectly in your organization, but it can be tweaked to your own desire. And I think if we are building this information position towards, for example, on Conti, and if we share this information, and if we compare our top 10 threat actors, and then start sharing information and building information positions, perhaps we can also then form the alliances, those, you know, those public-private, multidisciplinary groups, and use the concept to share our intelligence and basically action that information against the criminal and nation-state groups that are targeting us. And that's what I would like to achieve with my Who Shares Wins concept. I want this to go from information sharing to actionable information and to engagement. So I challenge you, and then I stop. I challenge you to, you know, come to me and let's compare notes on what are your top 10 threat actors. And we will share the information we have and then improve our information position. And that is what I wanted to share here with you. And thank you for listening to my first presentation.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, as I said, we have microphones at the front and in the middle.
You make it easy for me.
That's because Kautu isn't in the room, but...
I'll ask a question. I'll ask a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, so great overall concept and presentation here, so good job on your first. My question to you is, what metrics did you use to actually prove to management, et cetera, that the sharing actually helped you win? I was hoping to see a couple of graphs or a couple of numbers or something here to kind of what, you know, this is the kind of thing where that kind of evidence is really useful to have when having those conversations with management, et cetera, about why to break down the barriers and share some of what we have with others, because that makes us X% more effective, et cetera. So if you could share anything that you were able to track, or the metrics you were, even if they were informal metrics, what you were using to declare success in this, that would be really useful. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your question, and it's a very good one. And I'm going to be honest here. What we used was basically the examples of shares and the feedback we got from it. And feedback is not always the things. And that's what we brought to our leadership. But the most important thing was to make sure that the instrument, the processes, the control documents that we wrote, that they were accepted by our management and by legal. That was our first achievement. And for the rest, we regularly just provide metrics of how many shares we've put out. And whenever we get good feedback, we bring that in. But the process isn't that long running that we already can have beautiful graphs of how good this actually works. But we feel it works, and it is indeed important to convince your leadership. And if you want, we can, outside of this meeting, try to get you more information on that.
I'm going to throw a question to you. How do you talked about auditing, etc. How do you track the information that you've shared? Do you have a formal system for it? And how does that affect potential auditing in the future of what you've shared?
Yeah, it is still a bit clunky system, but we do record. We have a process based on Jira and Excel, and that's where we track every share that we make. Also, whether it's a quick share or make a checker share, and we record those. Also, who made them and where we have sent them to. At this point in time, it's still just an email-based system. Nevertheless, what we want to do is to further automate that. And also, for example, start to use MISP for the bigger part of the sharing, and use that process also to record what we have shared out there. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Well, if not, I'd like to thank Jaap again and remind everyone, please fill in your surveys.
Thank you very much.
The awards luncheon is next, so you can make your way down to the main floor. Thank you.